So this video lesson is all about adding with negative numbers. And in order to talk about adding with negative numbers, we need to go all the way back to the beginning and talk about what addition really means. That is, what does 25 plus 14 really mean? What does it represent? How can we think about and represent addition? So go ahead and pause the video. Spend 15 to 30 seconds brainstorming some things that addition might mean, and come back when you're ready to move on. So there's a few different things that you could talk about when you talk about what addition means. On the one hand, it's the bringing together of groups. So you have one group of 25, one group of 14, put them together, you end up with a group of 39. And that's great when it comes to adding with positive numbers. But when it comes to negative numbers, we have to think about addition slightly differently. And to think about that, we go back to the idea of a directed number. The idea that the number 15, in fact, represents a change of 15 on the number line in the positive direction, whereas the number negative 15 actually represents a change of 15 in the negative direction on a number line. And so when we think about addition like this, as in series of leaps on a number line, then we can start talking about how to add together negative numbers, how to add positive and negative numbers together, and just generally create the entire complex for adding with positive and negative numbers. And of course, one of our major questions is, how do we know which direction to leap? And that comes from those directed numbers, as we say. Negative numbers leap to the left in the negative direction. Positive numbers leap to the right in the positive direction. So when it comes to adding numbers, there are two things that we're looking at. Two things we need to know. One is how far are we away from zero, which has to do with absolute values, because absolute values are distances from zero. And the second is whether or not our final distance from zero will be on the positive side of the number line or the negative side of the number line. So we're looking for, is the sum positive or negative, and how far do we end up away from zero? Keeping all of those things together, we can come up with some pretty handy rules for adding with negative numbers. So first, I want to start off with what's actually the easier of the two to understand, which is adding with simply negative numbers, only negative numbers together. So we could look at this and say, all right, I want to know what negative 15 plus negative 20 is. And so if we start out at negative 15 on the number line, and think of, okay, well, negative 20 is a movement of 20 farther to the left. So we start at negative 15, which is already to the left of a number line. And we jump another negative 20, which is 20 to the left. Well, we're 15 to the left, and then move to the left another 20. So in the end, we are 35 units away from zero, because 15 and 20 have moved in the same direction, and we're on the negative side. So negative 15 plus negative 20 is negative 35. Both have moved left away from zero. Let's take a look at another example of what that might mean. Let's say instead, this time, we're looking for, let's call it negative 5 plus negative 40. Well, here we start off where our problem says to. Here's negative 5. And when we leap negative 40 on the number line, it's 40 to the left. So we start off 5 to the left of 0. We jump another 40 to the left of 0. And we end up at 45 to the left, or 45 in the negative direction. So negative 5 plus negative 40 is negative 45. And by this point, you probably recognize, both with negative 15 plus negative 20 and negative 5 plus negative 40, that it's essentially like adding positive numbers. 15 plus 20 is 35, 5 plus 40 is 45, and two negatives have stayed on the negative side of the number line. Because if we start at 0 and just move constantly to the left, we're never going to go back. We're never going to end up to the right of 0 on the number line. We're going to stay negative, and we're just going to keep getting farther and farther away. So that brings us to the rule for adding numbers that are both negative together, and that's if the numbers have the same sign, that's both positive or both negative, you just add their absolute values and keep the same sign. That is 15 plus 20 equals 35, and negative 15 plus negative 20 is negative 35. Add their values together, keep the signs. Go ahead, pause the video, write this definition down, or rather, write this rule down, come back when you're ready to move on. So here's two examples of things you might do for adding integers with the same sign. Go ahead, pause the video, see what you can do with them, come back when you're ready to move on. Or if you're still a little bit confused, it's all right to try it, get as far as you can, and then come back to watch the answers. So pause the video, work on them, come back when you're ready to move on. Well, for the numbers on the left, we know how to add positive numbers together. 17 plus 83 is 100. We know how to do that. We've been doing that for a long time. On the right side, for problem number 2, negative 24 plus negative 47, well, here's 0. Here's negative 24. And to move 47, negative 47 on the number line, we're going to keep getting farther and farther and farther away from 0 on the negative side. How far away from 0? Well, we've already gone 24. We go another 47, which gives us 71, because 24 plus 47 is 71, and we stay on the negative side. So we have negative 71. When in doubt with adding integers, you can always put it on the number line and draw out that motion. So now let's take a look at what happens if we have a positive and a negative number that we're adding together. In this case, we have what we call mixed signs, or different signs. And as you can see with the red bars and the blue bars, the positive numbers move to the right, the negative numbers move to the left. So let's take a look first at a problem like 45 plus negative 20. Now 45 starts out right here. And if we're going to add a negative 20 to it, that means we're going to move 20 to the left on the number line. So we're actually getting closer to 0 because 45 is motion to the right and negative 20 is motion to the left. So some of that motion is going to cancel itself out and it's going to keep it in a tighter, closer ball around 0. So our absolute value is actually not going to get bigger. We're not going to end up 65 units away from 0. We're going to end up 45 to the right, take away 20, so 45 minus 20, and we only end up 25 units from 0. So 45 plus negative 20 is 25, positive 25. Let's take another look and see if we can come up with a rule for adding with different signs. Let's say at this time you wanted 15 plus negative 30. Well, we start with 15. We take a negative 30. And when we put it on the number line, we see that not only have we gotten closer to 0, we've actually gone all the way past 0 and onto the negative side of the number line. How far have we gone to the negative side of the number line? Well, in those 30 steps, 15 of them were taken up by getting back to 0, which means we have 15 steps left towards the negative end, and we end up on the negative side because 30 to the left is greater than 15 to the right. And so with both of these examples, we've actually subtracted those values rather than adding them together. They're not getting farther from 0, they're staying close, and that brings up the rule for adding numbers with unlike signs. Subtract their absolute values because the negative number is going to go to the left, whereas the positive number wants to move to the right, and there is some amount of canceling of motion there, and then the sum has the same sign as the add-in with a larger absolute value. Go ahead, pause the video, write this rule down, and we'll come back with some practice problems. So here are two examples before we get to some problems for you to do on your own. Here in 17 plus negative 83, here's 17. Negative 83 moves all the way over to the left on the number line. How far to the left of 0? Well, 17 of those steps have already been taken up getting back to 0. 83 minus 17 is 66, but we end up on the negative side because negative 83 is a greater absolute value than 17. Now, for the question on the right, negative 24 plus 47, our rule says we subtract them. And that's partially because from negative 24 to add 47 takes us across 0. How far across 0? 23 steps, and we end up positive. So here's a set of practice problems for you to work on. Go ahead, pause the video, find the sum for these problems. Remember, same signs, you add the absolute values together. Different signs, we subtract the absolute values together, and come back when you are ready to move on. Okay, so let's start with the problem in the upper left. A negative plus a positive, we subtract their absolute values to get 5. 42 is greater than 37, so it's a positive 5. Down on the bottom left, that's very simple. We know 75 plus 25 is 100. On the top right, we have a negative number plus a negative number. That means Here's 0, here's negative 24, and we're going to end up moving to the left by 47, farther away from 0 to get to negative 71. And finally, negative 75 plus 25, two different signs for numbers. So if we start out at negative 75 and move by positive 25, that takes us closer to 0. How close? Well, 75 minus 25 steps back to 0 gives you negative 50. And so anytime that we have some confusion about how to add negative numbers, we can always use a number line, which leads to the phrase that I like to use for adding and subtracting negative numbers. When in doubt, draw it out.